Start this party. Welcome to the smartest people in the room. We are so glad you are here with us, and just by showing up, you are already demonstrating your very own smarts. Today, we are pleased to deliver a dream team pairing of British music rock stars, business rock stars, one who's very familiar to our audience, and another whom you might not know by name, but you sure love the work he's been doing behind the scenes for many years. More on that in a moment. Before we get started, let me take care of some business. First, to the audience, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat window. The reason we do these webinars is twofold. First, we want to showcase really smart people and the amazing work they do day to day in the music industry. But the second reason is a bit more nuanced. Many of you know that I am a music industry headhunter. I place music executives in roles throughout the industry. So by definition and function, I help people connect with companies. In this series, my goal is to help you make more connections, and I invite you to take full advantage of that opportunity. Specifically, I invite you to engage with the speakers and the other attendees in the chat of the Zoom. Please introduce yourselves, share your LinkedIn profile, say hello to your friends, and make some new ones. And ask questions of our speakers. We will try to address as many of those as possible during the course of the interview. Also, please make sure your chat is set to address speakers and attendees. I want to thank our sponsors, for without their support, we could not keep this series free. I want to thank First Horizon Bank, Bufkin Baker, Four Roses Bourbon, the Tennessee Entertainment Commission, Lightning 100, Tennessee Brew Works, Moo TV, Jive Printing, Project Music, and Cushmaster's brand of CBD products. So let's get down to business. In today's host seat, we welcome back my good friend and music industry's international ambassador of goodwill, Ralph Simon. Ralph has enjoyed a spectacular 30-plus year career in a variety of prominent fields. He is a music industry visionary who co-founded major indie leaders Zomba and Jive Records, signed talent, grew a globally successful music publishing company, managed some of the world's top record producers, and was EVP at Capitol Records and Blue Note, and also foresaw the potential of mobile phones and social media very early on. One of the founders of the global mobile entertainment and mobile social media industry, and popularly known as the father of the ringtone. Ralph has consistently been at the forefront of mobile media innovation, mobile learning and social media ideation, and next stage AI mobile video. He correctly predicted that the future belongs to screenagers everywhere who run their social media lives, music streaming, and connecting on their mobile phones. In addition to all that, he's one of the nicest people I've ever met, and I'm blessed to count him as a friend. Welcome back, Ralph.
Thank you, Tom. Great to be here with you today.
From Los Angeles, no less, instead of London. And joining Ralph as today's featured guest is Garry Blackburn. Garry is a legendary and very important figure in the modern UK music management and artist development scene. He is well known in the US and internationally as the artist manager of iconic artists such as Fatboy Slim, legendary DJ Pete Tong, Madness, Idris Elba, and Neil Colley, among others. But that's only the tip of the proverbial iceberg of his success, his creative smarts and impact on the global music business. His Anglo management and Anglo plugging business empire across publishing, recorded music, management, and breakthrough promotion consistently racks up impressive hits and live performance events that have become legendary and influential in the modern era. Garry made a name for himself. On to this microphone. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
He made a name for himself as a hugely successful radio plugger in the late 80s and early 90s, rising initially to become the head of radio promotion at Island Records during its glory years, and then being instrumental in breaking these major global acts: Oasis, Primal Scream, Paul Weller, Portishead, the Chemical Brothers, and of course Fatboy Slim. Additionally, he manages several new emerging UK acts such as Deadly Avenger, Effie, Glow, The Queen's Head, Hot Since '82, and others. He's been responsible for imagineering and producing some of the world's most iconic DJ and EDM-centric live events around the world to hundreds of thousands of music fans. Please welcome these two rock stars to the smartest people in the room. Take it away, Ralph.
Thank you, Tom. And Garry, welcome, welcome, welcome to Nashville and the United States and North America. Garry Blackburn, live in London.
Thank you, Ralph. Thank you, Tom, for the intro. You made me sound very grand and slightly intimidated by that, but very happy to talk about things with you this morning, your time, sorry.
It is the morning in LA, it's afternoon in New York, and in London where you are, Garry, it's obviously 7 p.m. or thereabouts in the evening. And,
it's tea
Garry,
time. It's tea time in Cornwall, and I'm actually a 4-hour drive outside London at the moment. And Joe Biden and our Boris Johnson and the rest of the G7 are just down the road having their chat about the future of the Western world.
Oh, good. So you can invite Joe Biden and Jill Biden in for a glass of good old English ale.
We're going surfing in the morning, actually, at 7:30.
Incredible. That's right. Cornwall, of course, is the key surfing spot in the UK. So, Garry, great to have you with us. And I thought that what we do, just to give all of our viewers in the chat room some idea about what you do, and also just say hello to some great friends, Alan Walmart, the great music executive, Cindy Wilson, a great former promoter and manager. Cindy, great to see you on this. Mark Cates, who I think, Garry, you know Mark Cates, very well known in terms of mixing and remixing and a great creative. So Mark, welcome.
I've come across Mark before.
Very good. Melinda Ebert, Nathan Bryden, the well-known Los Angeles-based producer Nick Page, Paul Zamek, who is well known as someone who has got great ears for hearing hits, particularly in Nashville, Skip Franklin, Stacey Turner, Tippy Younger, Tommy McDonald, and William Garry, just to name a few. So Garry Blackburn, first of all, what we thought we'd do is we'd start with you going back a few years. First of all, you started a plugging company at Anglo Plugging in 1984. You developed Anglo Management in 1996. But let's go back to the punk movement and the start of that, because that was an era that really got you going in an enormous way, particularly around the period when Billy Idol, Generation X, The Damned, and a great club in London called the 100 Club. Just give us a little bit of a sense of how you started getting involved in that new romantic punk era.
Well, I guess it was just like most of my life, it's all been a happy accident. You know, I was 18. I was trying to get into university. I needed to do a job for a year. I kind of completely lucked out by getting a job as an office boy in a record company, a very small British independent. And that kind of, I mean, in those days, London was in black and white. There was really no color about the place. The pubs used to close at 11 o'clock in the evening. So there was nothing to do. And at 18, I got this job. I moved into London, got a little flat in London, and started to discover the underworld of London, which was pioneered by all the freaks. And I mean that in the nicest possible way. Anyone who was alternative, there was this whole kind of subculture that was slowly revealed to this 18-year-old arriving in London, and it blew my head off. And working in the record business, I mean, I always loved music. I'd had like every kid, I had a pathway where music kind of got me through difficult times, gave me identity, brought me into different tribes, where we discovered reggae, we discovered soul, we discovered Ziggy Stardust, we discovered Brian Eno through Roxy Music, all these guys that you wouldn't normally see walking down the street. And that's where the journey began. And I really feel as I've never looked back since then.
So, Garry, during this process, you also went to the London School of Economics to study. Obviously, other well-known graduates from the LSE, as it's known, include, of course, Mick Jagger, but many other prominent musicians have been to the LSE.
Yeah.
A great feedback. And while that was going on, electronic music was starting to emerge.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, what was happening was basically I went to what's called a secondary modern school. So there was a two-tier system in England. There were grammar schools and secondary modern schools. I went to a secondary modern school. I did well there. This girl and I were guinea pigs. We were chosen into applying for Oxford and Cambridge, which I failed to get into, which was my first experience of utter dismal failure. But I got this place at LSE, and I'd taken a year. I mean, a gap year is a very kind of popular thing these days. But when in the 70s, around 76, that was a pretty unusual thing. So I had a year of experience in the record company, and I ended up at LSE. And LSE, I always thought was second best. But what it turned out to be was an unbelievable melting pot of minds. And it was right in the middle of London. And during that period, punk rock was happening. My Saturday job was in a shop in the King's Road, which was next to Vivian Westwood's shop. So you had all these kids coming in, all the punks were coming in there, and my eyes were opening wider and wider and wider to what was going on. Then when I was at LSE, just up the road from there was a club called the Blitz. And that's where one of the kids I was at college with, Robert Elms, who's now a broadcaster on BBC London, and he's kind of the voice of the New Romantic movement. So it was right in front of me. We were in it. We were living it. I went to the show where the Damned played at the 100 Club, the famous night. The following night, the Sex Pistols were there. When I got there, we arrived. I mean, I don't know if you know the 100 Club. You go down a staircase to get into it. It's fairly small. We nearly didn't go in because as we arrived, all these kids were coming out covered in blood because they'd been throwing glasses in there. We plucked up the courage. We went down there, and we walked into this. It was like walking into theatre. It was incredible. Susie Sue was in there, dressed in this punk, the outfits kids wore then. It was so exciting. It was so challenging. So anyway, that was the beginning, I think.
So with that era, you were also there right at the very genesis of finding some new acts of the time, including Spandau Ballet that went on to have some big hits in North America, and also Duran Duran, who were signed to you. You were working for Carlin Music. That was another job that you got.
Okay, look, I don't know how much time you want to spend on the old bits, but Spandau, when we finished uni, none of us really knew what to do. We were all trying to find our pathway. And I'd run a football team at LSE called the LSE Cosmos. And I'd met this kid from Berlin who was a professor at Berlin Free University, young guy, who was doing a sabbatical at LSE. And he organized a football tour for the LSE Cosmos in Berlin. So the core of my friends, we all went to Berlin at the end of our degree. And of course, the scene in Berlin was, Bowie had just recorded his Berlin albums there. So this whole, and the city was still divided by the wall. So you had East and West. We discovered that West Berlin was actually an island in the middle of East Germany. I didn't know that until I traveled there. And this kind of melting pot of all the kids there who were dodging the German draft were there. It was this weird mix, and the echoes of the war were still around. There was this amazing nightclub in Bleibtreustrasse off the Kudamm called Jungle, where we started hearing this music that we'd never discovered before. Anyway, Bob Elms and I, Bob was in the right back in our football team, we went out to Spandau because the prison was still there with some of the Nazis still in it. So we thought this would be so weird to be next to it. When by the time I got back to London, Bob had gone back and named Spandau Ballet after the trip out to Berlin. So this whole new romantic thing was happening. Again, it's all about dressing up. It's all about music that you've never heard before. And we got Steve Dagger, who manages Spandau, had been at LSE with us. He came in. My first job was with Freddie Beanstalk at Carlin. It was a guy called Mike Collier hired me. And I got Steve to come in and, you know, I told them all about Spandau. They could see it was happening. They could see something interesting was going on, but Steve was too smart to do a publishing deal. He wanted to control all his rights. Really smart. He's a young guy. He was a 20-year-old guy. He already understood, don't give your rights away to the big record companies. Anyway, so Spandau wouldn't sign. So I went to try and find the next big thing. Went and saw Duran Duran at the Roadrunner in Birmingham, got their managers, the Barrow brothers, to come down, and they created their own publishing company and signed it to Carlin. Subsequently, I left Carlin because Freddie never gave me a piece of the deal, which they promised to give me. They promised they would give me a piece of the deal, and they never gave it to me. So I upped and left. And I had only been at Carlin for 6 months. I don't want to sort of say too much about how negative about it, because I think those guys are in their graves now, but it was a good lesson. It was a really good lesson for me.
Well, it also stimulated you to then leave and go and join Island Records and Chris Blackwell, where you joined.
Ralph, it was amazing. It was amazing going over to Ireland. It was such a great record company. There were no bad acts there. There was nothing there that I didn't adore musically.
So who would have been on the label at that point? Kid Creole, Grace Jones, U2?
Well, I think Chris had signed a deal with Z Records, which had Kid Creole on it and a few other kind of great acts.
Right.
And so Kid Creole was, for me at this point, I was a radio plugger. I never really defined myself as a radio plugger. I just loved music. And this was my way into this exotic, beautiful industry.
Right.
And so Kid Creole was one of those things, one of those acts where it was right time, right place, and radio just loved it straight away. The only difficulty I had with Kid Creole and the Coconuts was losing the Coconuts at Top of the Pops. I don't know if you know that in Britain, the whole chart thing was predicated on getting onto this one TV show. It's a bit like Soul Train in a way, where if you got on this TV show, you had a hit. And Kid Creole and the Coconuts, there were 13 of them, I think. Cost a fortune to bring them over. Brought them over to the BBC. BBC Television Centre was this labyrinthine building. And the guys got off the plane. We picked them up at the airport, brought them to TV Centre. They were due to do their rehearsal, and the Coconuts went missing. The Coconuts were the girl backing singers. And I never forget the producer screaming at me from the control room going, "Where are the fucking Coconuts?" Excuse me. Sorry, excuse my language. But yeah, it was great. Being at Ireland was just wonderful because it had such a deep history of great music. Chris was so enigmatic, such an unusual person to be running a label. He built the thing after his own personality, I suppose. It was different from anywhere else. We all worked in an old laundry building at the back of this lovely house in Chiswick in St. Peter's Square, and it was called the War Room, and the whole company was based around one table, basically. So wow. It was very unorthodox setup for a record company, and I've tried to echo that in the way I've structured my companies and the way we work. And at the moment, my business is based around a big houseboat floating on the Thames.
Wow. Incredible.
It's centered around a war room. I mean, to be honest, we haven't used it because we only got it ready since the pandemic, and we haven't actually been able to get back into the office.
Amazing. But during that period, you worked with Scritti Politti. You worked with Julian Palmer at 4th and Broadway, where you start working with people like Jocelyn Brown, Gwen Guthrie, Trouble Funk. And then you also take your first trip to Jamaica, but you also meet Pete Tong at 16 during that period.
Yeah. Well, it was great. I mean, for all the kids who are out there now starting in the business, all the contemporaries that they meet will be they'll be their relationships for the next 20, 30 years. They'll find their friends that way. And that's what happened with me. I met interesting people. I met a Radio 1 DJ called Peter Powell, who we became great friends. And he was very interested in new music and would subsequently play all the artists that I brought him, which was a powerful weapon in those days to get new artists on Radio 1. And interestingly, I went to, there was a club in Leicester Square called the Empire Ballrooms, and they were running a DJ competition, and Pete Powell, the Radio 1 DJ, he might have been on Radio Luxembourg at that point, was one of the judges, and a young 16-year-old Pete Tong was one of the contestants.
Incredible.
And Pete, yeah, and so I think I was 19 or 20, and Pete was 16, and Pete actually won that competition, but they couldn't give him first prize because he was the first prize was a residency at the club, and he was too young to do it. So he kind of got given second prize.
Incredible. And
then Pete went on to be, has had the most staggering career in broadcasting and in the music business since, and is the most knowledgeable person about electronic music I've ever met. And I've known him for over 40 years.
Well, we certainly want to get into more about Pete and the incredible Ibiza classics that he's been doing recently. But more specifically, this was a period where you then leave Ireland, your plugging company career, you start breaking some interesting acts. You break the first hits with the House Martins. You work with the LAS, the LAS. You work with Billy Bragg, you work with the Beautiful South, and a lot of really interesting acts that are really tastemakers of that new era. Give us some sense of some of the acts and the music that really impressed you, and why that new movement of indie alternative really started to take hold.
Okay, so, well, the first thing to say is I got fired by Island Records. I had 3 amazing years there. And Chris bought Stiff Records, and I was the head of promotion at Island. And part of the deal when Chris bought Stiff was that Dave Robinson would come in and be MD of Island.
Dave Robinson was one of the founders of Stiff, right?
He founded Stiff, yeah. A brilliant record guy. Anyway, so Robbo came in, and we got on great. We were plugging Frankie Goes to Hollywood at that time. We had the Frankie Goes to Hollywood single Relax at #1 in the singles chart. We had the Bob Marley compilation album at #1 in the album chart. And then Robbo fired everybody.
On what grounds?
Because he brought, what he did, he brought the Stiff team in to replace us all. It was catastrophic, Ralph. It was one of the big formative moments in my career. When you get a punch in the face like that, it was tough. It was really tough. But I went home, talked to Jill, my wife, and I was in a bad way. We just bought our first house. My son was 6 months old. It was really frightening. And Jill said to me, "Look, now's the time to start your own business. You've talked about it a lot. This is the moment to do it." And I was nervous, Ralph. I got to tell you, I was really nervous about it. I had a big mortgage, my first child, a lot of responsibility, very, very nervous about it. But just reaching out to the people I know, people like Pete, reaching out to them, talking to them about what had happened. I got so much support that we started an independent radio promotion company. And it was the first year was quite tough because we went into it without any preparation. And I had a partner then, a guy called Paul White, who had been my assistant at Island. So we were actually called the Anglo-Irish Plugging Company then, because Paul came from Belfast. And it took us a year to have our first hit, which was a record called Trapped by Colonel Abrams that was on MCA. And but it's a big record, and it was a record that we really thought was cool. And fortunately, I had a close relationship. We'd started working with Billy Bragg and formed a great friendship with Andy McDonald, who ran a small label called Go Disc.
Go Disc, great indie label.
Great indie label. Andy was another amazing. You meet these people like yourself, Ralph. You know about music. You know about artists. You know how to talk to them. You know how to help them. You know what they need. They all need different, not counsel, but they all need different support to
Right.
walk that line, to be as good as they are. It's all about that confidence thing, where they're
Right.
confident enough to walk on the rope, but not so overconfident that they fall off, where they're just on the edge of the comfort zone. That's where all the good stuff happens, isn't it? And in the same way, Robbo firing me, that's what happened to me. I mean, I'd never been dropped out of my comfort zone like that before. And anyway, so we started the company, and we had 3 years of amazing fun. We bought 2 little black minis. All the other pluggers had BMWs and Porsches, and they'd rock up at Radio 1. It was all about, this is the 80s. It was all about showing how wide your lapels were, how wide your shoulder pads were.
Amazing.
And we had 2 little black minis, like The Italian Job, the movie,
Yeah.
The Italian Job. So we used to hare around London in these 2 minis. And it took us a long time to get going. But Andy and Godis probably was, he saw that we had the hunger and the passion and the enthusiasm. And we started having hits. And that's where I actually met Norman, Fatboy Slim, when he was the bass player in the House Martins, which was a little indie band from England, who just had hit after hit after hit, led really by Paul Heaton, one of the greatest songwriters in British music history, and not really credited for it yet. He's the guy's a genius, writes fantastic lyrics, fantastic melodies. And Norman was the bass player in this band, so when the House Martins split up, Norman started to release independent dance music, because Norman had been a DJ as well as being in the band. And I kind of got involved with him on a deeper level, more than a plugger, basically. I might have jumped ahead a bit in the story there, but that's basically what was going on. I think musically at that time, it was so exciting, lots of things happening. It was great. Mobile phones were probably, remember when they were like bricks, you used to carry them around really heavy. That was probably what was going on then. The bloody things never worked anyway.
Right.
But London was still, you could still drive around London and see people, and there was lots of exciting shows going on, and music was always, that's the great thing, isn't it, about what we do? It's always exciting. There's always something brilliant coming through.
So this is all pre-streaming, obviously. And just on that note, just wanted to say hi to some of the people participating today: Amy Lee, Ashley Butala, the great Barry Coburn, great manager from the Nashville area, Barry Evans, I think Barry is calling in from London, Barry Taylor, Bill Huning, Charles Minifield, Chris Clapp, Craig Money, David Shannon, Denise de Maria. Wow, we've got a good bunch today. And Garry, just getting back, during that period, you also started working with Alan McGee, who founded Creation, that had signed Oasis, so that you were working Oasis, you were working Primal Scream. Was that when Bobby Gillespie and Andrew Innes were still in that band?
Yeah. I mean, meeting Alan it was basically a guy called Tim Abbott, who was, he was Alan's general manager, marketing guy. And Creation was always very much on the outside of the mainstream record business. They didn't like participating in the whole thing of trying to, get your records on the radio and all that. They just believed in their artists, and they were all like rock stars. They all lived the lifestyle as well. And we were the first pluggers who kind of met Creation and kind of were able to build a rapport with them, I think. And we started out working Ride, the shoegazer band. And we kind of we were very lucky. We got a break with Ride and got them on top of the pops. And Alan started to think, yeah, maybe this plugging thing can help my acts. And we worked at Boo Radley's, and we worked a load of good stuff there. But he signed Oasis, and he got us to go up and see them in Manchester, and in the city, I think it was, at Manchester.
That is the concert in Manchester, correct?
Yeah, and the first time we went to see them, I mean, I'll be honest, I didn't even notice Noel, but Liam was such a beacon on the stage. He was just dripping attitude and sex appeal. You know, he was just drop dead gorgeous, and the sort of the way he came across, it was street level, but it was rock star. It was just incredible, and every bloody song was amazing, absolutely amazing. So Alan said to me, Gary, you're playing in the World Cup. It's the last minute. It's a penalty. The ball is Oasis. You've got to get it into the net, and there's no goalkeeper standing there. He said, that's how easy this is going to be. And relatively speaking, promoting Oasis was it was easy. It was so fantastic. And of course, they were just massive, absolutely massive. And interestingly, one of the
to work material like Wonderwall and all of those great classics that really defined Britpop, that became a whole movement of that era that you were right at the center of.
Yeah, suddenly we were right in the middle of it. So with Andy at Go Disc, we had, and a guy called Ferdy Younger Hamilton. I think Ferdy runs Columbia now in the UK. Ferdy was working for Andy at Go Disc. He signed Portishead. You remember Portishead?
Sure.
You know, trip hop. Where did that come from? You know, completely different genre of music was invented down in Bristol. Kind of like, you know, the sort of bastard son of Massive Attack. And Portishead, very difficult radio project, but an amazing artist to work. We had a very talented marketing guy at Go Disc called Tony Crean, and a great general manager called Mike Hennigan. You know, really good team. And so Portishead was happening. Oasis was happening. Primal Scream was happening. We suddenly, in the 90s, we found ourselves not driving around in little black minis anymore. We suddenly were in the middle of the game. It was a heady time. It was a really heady time.
Artist movement just created a whole new thing. And
it's very exciting to be in that moment when that happens, because the acceleration, the G-force of the acceleration is
way to describe it.
It makes you quite dizzy.
So let's just go to one of the first picture, Tom. If you can pull that up so we can get Gary's view on this interesting image that hopefully will come up onto the screen. Gary, let's just have a look at, here you are with Pete Tong, obviously signing that management contract that gives you at least 10-15% management commission, maybe not, but at any rate, that's you and Pete Tong, correct?
That's Pete and I, yeah. I mean, we talked about Pete earlier, who I met a very long time ago, but I've got to say, Pete's one of the most incredible people I've ever met. He's all the artists I manage are the basis of our relationship. It's always authenticity. You've got to love the music, and you've got to like the people that you work with. That's our mantra. Because if you start with, you know, so it's not about business. It's not about how successful it's going to be. It's about the chemistry of the relationship and about the beauty of the work that they're doing. And Pete, because I've known Pete for such a long time, and we came to manage him. This period of management I'm in with him at the moment has lasted about 15 years now, I think. And, you know, I've known Pete for over 40 years. I did manage Pete briefly earlier on, and got him his first radio job, actually, at Capital Radio. Richard Park hired him. But in those days, DJs didn't really make much money from performing. So it was really kind of a bit hobbyist and wasn't really going anywhere. And then Pete got his job with Roger Ames at London Records and kind of became more of a record executive. So the management thing kind of, you know, didn't really go anywhere. But then Pete came to see me, I don't know, you know, 15 years ago again, and we got talking, and he was, you know, he was nervous in a way about what was happening at Radio 1 because he was getting older, you know, every 3 years, a new generation would come through, and Pete was getting older at Radio 1 and he was a bit worried about his future there. And I helped him sort that out in his head, where his dependency, he was defining his career as a Radio 1 DJ. And I said, you're so much more than that. Because I was outside of him, I could see that clearly. And so we were able to kind of restructure the way he thought about his job, his career. And we started to turn it from being just playing gigs and doing radio shows to building a proper business with assets. So we started doing deals where Pete owned the business. And now Pete's portfolio of activity is very broad ranging. You know, he has an executive role at William Morris, which was the agency that we moved to for his work, but he also has an executive relationship at William Morris. And we've built brands outside of the broadcasting, such as the Essential Mix and All Gone Pete Tong. And we started to set Pete up as a resident DJ in Ibiza, which is another kind of asset rather than a service function. Pete's now an executive with Mark Gillespie at 360, wow. Running the A&R for that label. Wow. And actually, the deal that you see us signing there wasn't a management contract. It was Pete's an investor in a whiskey brand called 808. Incredible. And that was the contract for 808. And actually, what we're in the process of doing at the moment is setting up an online DJ academy. Online teaching at the moment is, well, it's here, isn't it? It's here, it's to stay. And we're building a DJ academy, and we've just, I won't say too much about that because we haven't announced that yet, sorry.
So Garry, here's something I'd like to ask you, because you've spoken about Pete, obviously, and the DJ and the emergence of DJ culture. And I'd like you to just speak to and talk about Fatboy Slim and Norman Cook and his career. And if you could just give us a little bit of background into something that was really incredible that you developed, which was the Big Beach Boutique in Brighton in England, which basically was an accelerator for Fatboy Slim's career. But you mentioned he was the bass player in the House Martins, who then became a DJ.
Well, it's another, okay, so another happy accident, really. The House Martins split up. We were an independent radio plugging company, and I'd kind of had a friendship with Norman, and he was a little bit kind of weirded out by the House Martins ending, because the band ended on a #1 record. Oh. You know, they just decided to do the James Dean thing. You know, we're as big as we're ever going to get. Let's pull the plug on it and go and do different things. So Paul Heaton of the House Martins went on to form the Beautiful South, which had another incredible career. And Norman started the Norman Cook International Roadshow, which he immediately took on tour.
What?
With no preparation. So the Norman Cook International Roadshow consisted of a backing band called the Real Sounds of Africa, which is a 13-piece Zimbabwean band, which Norman paid for to come over from Africa and play with him. He had graffiti artists, rappers, dancers. There were like 20 of them on stage. And Norman invited me to come and see them play at the event in Brighton, club that held about 1,500 people. So there's 23 people on stage and 15 people in the audience, including me. But the show was amazing. It was absolutely brilliant. And what we did, I said to Norman, don't worry about it. Just go on and buy everybody a drink. So we bought the audience a drink to start the show off. The show was brilliant. And afterwards I said to him, Norm, this is amazing. Let me help you put this in front of a lot of people. So speed forwards about 15 years, and outside the event is Brighton Beach. And we ended up putting a show on Brighton Beach that 250,000 people came to.
Quarter of a million people for the,
Yeah.
and this is the Big Beach Boutique.
This is the Big Beach Boutique, yeah. So this was kind of like a defining moment of Fatboy Slim, and
Was that the
the
biggest
kind of
promotion?
the kind of emergence of DJs as big live artists, which is, you know, very common now, but at the time was kind of a bit unthinkable. You know, that a guy standing there basically doing the washing up, looks like he's doing the washing up, he's playing to hundreds of thousands of people. So, I mean, the beauty of it with working with Norman is, again, another person who I just have so much love and respect for. The guy's so special to me, and I mean, anyone who knows Norman will say this about him. You know, the guy's just not motivated by money at all. He's passionate about music. He's passionate about sharing music with people. Because he was in a band as a DJ, he knew the importance of connecting with the people in front of the booth. So he has that. He wasn't like a guy just concentrating on. A lot of DJs are very shy. You know, they can't be in bands. They don't have that in them. So they kind of hide behind the records. But Norman wanted connection. He wanted connection with the audience. And our journey was taking that from a very small environment to an ever increasing size of audience. And of course, you know, now it's just incredible. It's an international, it's a, you know, multi-million-pound business touring DJs.
Garry, just can you answer this question? You got Norman, Fatboy Slim, to perform in Brazil on the beach in Rio, where you got almost 1 million people to come and see what was effectively a DJ spinning, doing the washing up.
Yeah.
Potentiometers.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it wasn't really me, you know, it was all of us. It was the moment, it was the opportunity, it was there. Basically, the show in Brighton, the way it happened in Brighton was Big Beach Boutique 1 had an audience of about 60,000 people. And what it was, Channel 4, a TV channel in the UK, decided to broadcast the cricket, I think, you know, the test match on a screen on the beach. And there was a guy there called Alex Poots who put this together, and he rang us up. He rang David Levy, our wonderful agent. And Alex, David and I had a chat, and he asked if Norman would spin some records after the cricket, because a load of people would be sitting there in deck chairs watching the cricket on a balmy, sunny day on Brighton Beach. So we said, yeah, that sounds like fun. So Norman started DJing that night, and there were 40,000 people in front of the stage and 20,000 people behind it. It was one of those kind of happenings.
Right.
So at the end of that, I said to Norman, we've got to own this. We've got to do this again next year. Nobody else is doing anything like this. So Alex very kindly allowed us to appropriate his idea of a DJ playing on the beach. And we set up Big Beach Boutique 2. And it was a free concert, basically. There's no tickets for it. It's a free concert. And I went to sleep that night in a hotel in Brighton, very worried about if we would have enough people there to justify the investment we'd made in the infrastructure, in the amount of portaloos, the staging, the police, everything we had to set up. And I raised this degree of sponsorship money. But what had happened in the week going into that show, the weather got really good. It's the story of Norman playing on Brighton Beach for free kind of started to percolate and spread. Radio 1 got hold of the story. Chris Moyles, the breakfast show DJ, started talking every morning. He's talking about, shall we go down? You know, shall we not go down? As it turned out, the whole of London came down to Brighton that day.
It's 40 miles from London, right?
Yeah, came down. Yeah, Brighton's a sort of great city just south of London on the south coast. And it's what we would say, it went off. It went off in a big way. And of course, looking back on it, it's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying what happened, because it could have been a disaster. So, we were the city was completely overwhelmed. It was not unlike the Woodstock moment when the Hells Angels took control of security in front of the Stones at Woodstock. It was a little bit like that. We had a flotilla of boats in the sea running next to the stage. We had the beach, the shots of the beach. All you could see was people all the way down the beach. For most people, it was just a trip to the beach because we didn't have a big enough PA for them to hear it. So anyway, look, it was amazing. It cost us a fortune. We even had to pay for new tires for the dust carts collecting the rubbish after they went, because there was so much broken glass on the roads that all the tires burst on the dust carts. So it cost us a fortune. We had to pay we agreed to pay all these costs that were incurred. And afterwards, this thing called the Purple Report was written about how to put on major events, because obviously it's dangerous. It's dangerous when there's that many people, and it was, there was a lot of kind of stuff we had to deal with afterwards. But of course, when those moments happen, history's defined at those kind of moments. And it's an honor to be by happy accident in the middle of that process. And thank God it went well in the end.
So
we're actually making a documentary about it at the moment for next year. Next year is the 20th anniversary of that evening.
Garry, just give us a sense in terms of Norman and Pete playing internationally. This getting a huge audience for a DJ performance is now half of the course, and obviously pays very good money to your artists for doing this. You also represent the great movie star Idris Elba, but who really, you represent him as a DJ, not necessarily as a film actor. Just give us some sense of the audience hunger for this kind of attraction.
Well, let me go back to your question about Brazil, because I think that answers this part. Right. With the success of the show in Brighton, Norman had been playing in Brazil, and Brazilians bought into Norman's style of DJing, which is all about fun, partying. It's very democratic. And dance music is it's universal. There's lyrics don't really get in the way. The show with a DJ, the show is as much about the audience as it is about the guy spinning the records or the production that's put on. I mean, to be honest with Norman, we had no production in those early days. If you look at the footage of us playing on Brighton Beach, there is no production. There's just a sound system, a screen with a logo on it. It's David Levy, our agent, said to me one day, he said, Garry, you've got to spend, when we were a bit further down the line, starting to get, I remember where the first big fee we got for Norman was a festival in Holland where we got 35 grand. Now, for a DJ who's playing in a small club in Brighton, that's quite a big chunk of change. And David Levy said to me on the side of the stage, he said, you've got to spend some of this money on the show, because Norman was out there in front of the whole kind of Roskilde audience, just playing records. But of course, they were going nuts. People were going nuts for it.
And then, then you expanded this into Japan, Miami, Chateau Marmont. There's a movement in Detroit. This just expands globally.
Yeah, well, when something sparks off, the whole world wants to see it. Right. Now, it got to the point where the kind of the subculture of electronic music, of dance music, was this whole global network where clubs were hiring DJs. And it's so easy with the DJ, it's so uncomplicated. You just need the DJ and his little support team that keep him going on the road. And they turn up, they plug in, and they used to bring their record boxes, and now they bring their USB sticks, and they can download their sets. It's so much easier to do it. It's kind of changed a bit now because of what EDM in America kind of took it to another level, and production. I mean, we spend a lot of money now on production because it's It's what makes the show work in a festival context, with where people are seeing their expectations have been raised. But the lovely thing about dance music, it's very global, it's very connected. It's everybody can enjoy it, and it is about the audience. I think the reason DJs are successful really is because I think the audience is as much a part of the show as it's different. I mean, when you go and see a band, everyone goes and sings alongs to those songs and enjoys the stardom of that act. But if you go and see a DJ, it's the set that they put together and we all share the music. It's almost religious. It's almost levitational sometimes, where you go to these shows and the audience is together. And I mean, it does happen with bands as well. Of course it does. You know, that's happened to me at Oasis shows and Paul Weller shows, where you actually feel your feet are coming off the ground. But at dance shows, it's, you know, it's just wonderful. We've missed it so much over the last 15 months. It's going to be so lovely to get back to work.
Garry, let's just go to a couple more shots. Tom, let's go to the next picture, if we can. And just tell us briefly.
That's Norman goofing around in us. You know, we were in airport lounges. You know, when you're on tour, you just have to amuse yourselves. You know why it's going on. And
Crocodile Dundee hat there.
Yeah, well, you know, you're on the roads. You got nothing to do. You go and buy stupid stuff, don't you?
Let's go to the next picture. That's Norman Cook there. Who's that?
That's Norman and me
In a helicopter.
piloting a private jet in Brazil.
Is that right?
Well, after we did the big show on the beach in Rio, Norman was kind of like a god out there. And so I think for the next 10 years, we would go to Brazil, usually around Carnival in November, and play in Salvador, which is northern Brazil, which is kind of like, it's the poorer end of the country, Amazon Delta up that way. And Carnival in Salvador, anyone listening to this, it's the party you should go to. It is absolutely incredible. And they have these electronicos, which are like 18-wheeler trucks with flatbeds, and they build DJ platforms on the back of the trucks. And you know, Brazilian music is another whole thing. I mean, most of Brazilians are really into country music, satanage music. When they discovered the younger generation discovered electronic music, Norman went out there. It was a revelation, and we were invited to Carnival. And so you do a set where you start at one end of the town on the back of this truck, and 5 hours later you end up in the other side of the town. They sell a small amount of tickets for people to surround the truck, and they go with you for the whole show. They're your audience for the whole 5 hours. And then you drive through the town, and the whole town is awake all night long, celebrating Carnival. So Brazil's a big country, you know. I mean, on the maps that we have, it doesn't look as big as it really is. It's gigantic. It takes 4 hours to fly across the Amazon. And so anyway, we started going further and further into the backwaters of Brazil, and fortunately we were touring at such a level we could afford a jet, and we would fly around and do all these shows in Brazil. And it was really on the back of doing this huge show on Flamingo Beach, which is underneath Sugarloaf Mountain. And that was also a free gig. We had an amazing promoter out there, Luis Eurico Klotz, who helped us build the legend. He kind of got on the ride with us, and he managed to pull this show in Brazil. So there we were on the same level as the Stones again. And it wasn't 1 million people, Ralph. They estimated 350,000 people.
Not bad.
But this time we had delay towers going down the beach so everybody could hear it properly. It was an incredible night. It was just incredible.
So great that you can actually articulate this to us. Tom, let's go to the next shot, because this is, I think, something that would be important to explain, particularly to a North American audience. How are we doing there, Tom? So,
Okay, yes. So
Garry, so explain who this is and tell us about this particular band, because they sell out consistently in America. They are really now one of the great classic bands. Tell us who, tell us why.
okay, so this is a younger me with a younger Suggs, who's the lead singer in a band called Madness. Madness, very, very British band. But with a kind of collection of hit records. You know, this is what I always say about Madness. You know, most big bands, when they do a show, if they're doing a show and something goes wrong, they've got one track that they can fall back on to get the audience back on side. You know, if something goes wrong, Madness have 40 records they can fall back on. They've just got this legacy of amazing tunes that are at the heart of British pop music. And so what happened was, about 15 years ago, a guy called Hugh Gadsden walked into my office, who was an old friend of mine. He'd been an A&R man when I was working with Duran Duran. And he and I have been friends all our careers. And he walked in and he put a brown envelope on my table and he said, Garry, here's your share of the weekend's takings. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, if you manage Madness with me, this is your share of the wages for the weekend's gigs. So I had a peek inside and I thought, okay, let's have a chat about this. And I'd known the guys for a few years in Madness, because one of them, Chas Smash, had the band had been around for 40 years, and in one period they kind of stopped being Madness. You know, they retired for a bit, and Chas worked at Go Disc, which is I had an office next to him at Go Disc, so I'd kind of known the guys for a long time. And during that time, Carl had organised their comeback at Finsbury Park, where their band actually created an earthquake, because 45,000 people were jumping up and down at the same time, and it was measured on the Richter scale. So anyway, look, here's the great thing about Madness. At the time I got involved with Madness, it was like somebody pulled up in a beat up Rolls Royce, you know, that had not been loved, was rusty, and it kind of needed pimping up. And this Rolls Royce lumbered up, and I could just see what to do with them. And it was really, I want to talk about Jam, who's on this, he's one of the guys in the crowd here today. Jam's a colleague of mine who was working with us at the time, and he was sort of banging on to me about MySpace. And I didn't really understand what it was. And I'd heard an interview about how it was reaching people. But you take Madness, and suddenly you take the ability through social media to communicate directly with your audience. So you don't have the filters of an A&R man, a record company, a record store, a radio station. You actually have the ability to communicate directly with the guy who buys the ticket to stand in front of you at Wembley or at the Hollywood Bowl. That's a revolution. And Jam showed me that revolution. And so we started MadSpace, and pretty quickly, Jam had accrued 40,000 Madness fans who we were talking directly to. So suddenly the fact that we couldn't get arrested to get a record deal, we were talking to our audience directly. Now, you know, we've got millions of people who we talk directly to now with the band. Jam's just launched his own business called Ham On, where we take all these sort of opportunities and marketing ideas and help artists. We do all our social media within our own business now. As a management company, we embrace that as quickly, as soon as we discovered it, we embraced it, because it gave the artist the power to have the direct relationship with the audience. So who are the most important people in the room? it's the artist, and it's the audience. The rest of us are really just kind of little helpers to make that narrative, that relationship happen. And that's really the kind of that's kind of the basis of what my company and I've always been about. And I've got a big team of people now. I've got 16 people at Anglo and at Hamon. And that's what we do for our artists. You know, we have a small roster. I think we've got 16 acts at the moment.
About Neil Cowley, who's someone
Neil,
that you really
look, it's great. Thank you for bringing that up. I mean, I want to mention all my young acts because they're handpicked. They're all great people. They're all making great music. Neil is a guy that I went to see in a basement in the West End about 3 years ago. He was he's basically, his background is jazz. You know, he's a jazz musician, a pianist. Never seen anybody play a keyboard like him, quite like him. He's incredible. And he played like a punk rocker. It was quite a revelation for me. And I was looking for something, you know, I didn't want to keep repeating the same thing, you know, the DJ thing, or I was looking for something different. And Neil was that guy. And we had a nice drink after his show. And I said, you know, if you could make an electronic record, maybe we could try that out and start working together. And so there's a young lad in my building called Craig Duranty, who actually runs our labels division. And I asked Craig if he would help me do Neil. And now Craig kind of manages Neil. We've just released Hall of Mirrors, his electronic album, and it's just doing great. And it's been such a lovely journey to help him find a new lane, a new avenue to explore and create this amazing music. He's done all these amazing collaborations with Christian Loeffler and Ben Lucas Boyson. And it's taken me into a whole new genre of music, this kind of new classical lane. Is so exciting. And Neil's got a track on there's a peaceful piano playlist on Spotify. We've done 17 million streams on this track, and it's the most exquisite piece of music called Grace, just Neil and his piano. So it's just nice to discover. I still like discovering new things and working with new artists.
Garry, you know, it's just so interesting going on this ride with you and the way that you've so consistently been doing this. Unfortunately, we are just about beaten by the clock. So we are going to have to bring a close to this incredible session today, where not only have you shown the breadth of creative management, creative promoting, creative visioneering, but you've done this consistently now over many years, where you can ride a particular melodic trail, you can ride a musical trail, an EDM trail. Garry, this has really been great. Tom, over to you.
Hey, let me just echo what Ralph just said, Garry. This has been fantastic. Personally, as a stroll down memory lane for me, some of my favorite music of my formative years had your fingerprints all over it. So thank you for the magic that you sprinkled over all those bands. And one of the things I hope the audience took away from this is how you put the artist and the audience first. Nothing else matters. And that's exactly the reason you've been so successful. So it's no wonder.
Thank you. Well, it's always nice to talk about yourself. I think it's easy. I mean, somebody feeds you the question, like Ralph's a master at this. He's fed some lovely questions. And I mean, I could do another 3 hours easily, but I've got to go and have my tea.
I assure you I could, and I know the audience could as well. Ralph, once again, you are the master of ceremony, so thank you for continuing to grace this stage. I know the audience loves it. And to the audience, thank you for your continued support. I want to make sure you are aware that our next event on Tuesday, we've had to push the start 2 hours later. It's going to start at 4 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday, and you'll be getting an email about that. But nonetheless, thank you to everybody. And I'll close with my normal close of be nice to each other and get a shot so we can all get out there soon. Cheers, folks.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you so
Cheers.
much.